What's up, y'all? How's everybody doing? Hope everybody's well. Uh, on this day, January 20th, still starting out the new year, and there's been a lot going on, so things have been a little crazy. But hopefully, you and yours are doing well. Welcome to the Onyx Report. Y'all know how we do. Trying to make sure that I have everything going on here. It's been a crazy day already. But nevertheless, the Onyx Report, where we uplift black men and boys using critical analysis. So happy Wednesday to you all. I know this is the big inauguration day, which I celebrated like I usually do by sleeping through it entirely. So anyway, shout out to Damon. Shout out to Shop Talk. Hope you well. Remember, go to Shop Talk Live. Support the comic book store in question. You can find more information, I'm more than sure, on his page. But you want to definitely contribute as good brother Artisan over there is trying to acquire the shop and upgrade it. So let's support him in that endeavor. So check him out. Everin, Malika, what's going on? We will be having office hours tonight, so I hope my members are up for that. Michael, Eric, what's going on? Yusef, Barry, Cameron. Oh, Cameron came through. All right. That's what's up. Taylor, Ron. Hope everybody's well. Hope everybody's well. It's a crazy kind of time period, but I want to start like I normally do by honoring my members. Check this out and let's go ahead and honor them. Okay. So shout out to my supporters. Wouldn't be anywhere without y'all. So appreciate that. And if you're interested in supporting the show, you can definitely do so by going to, you can go a couple places. Let me get this up here. I have to feel remember where I put this bad boy. There we go. All right. So let me see here. You can support the show by becoming a member, and you can do so on a couple of different platforms that we have. Right. First one up would be doing so on YouTube. Right underneath the video, you can hit the subscribe button and go ahead and join by becoming a member. There's a member button there, and there are different levels of membership. You can look into the perks that come with them. So please go ahead and support. You can also send via Cash App, PayPal. You can do so on Patreon, become a film review member, as well as you can support the Institute for Black Male Studies there as well. So you can also shoot something on Venmo. So support the channel and try and make sure you extend so that we can keep this going. So yeah, support any way you can. Tonight, y'all know the subject, so we'll get into that shortly. I'm sure it will be an opinionated one, because if nothing else, we can definitely say that Nate Parker seems to know how to generate intense opinion. So I hope everything is well and that you guys can hear me clearly. All right, West Coast, what's going on? Claudius from the UK. All right, what's up? Glad you're here. All right, so we're getting it in. And we will definitely start by going with our series here. So let me see here. Where'd it go? Man, there's so much going on. I'm trying to get it all together. All right. So we starting with our Sacred Black Masculine series. Y'all know how we do. We like to honor black men over here. We celebrate black men here, and we don't just roll by stereotype by any measure. So that is one of the features of the Onyx Report, as well as pretty much anything else I'm engaged in, where we definitely have to put black men up to be seen as human and as black men and not caricatures, which is more popular than anything. So, starting out, we got a young brother here, right? This is based on an article entitled "It Starts with the Idea." Oakland teen creates successful education business after his young niece and nephew said they were bad at science. You can find this article on AtlantaBlackStar.com. This brother here, Ahmed Muhammad, is an 18-year-old senior from Oakland, California, who attends Oakland Tech, right? High school. Okay. It says one day his niece and nephew, let me see, wait, hold on. So he attends Oakland Tech. One day he asked his niece and nephew if they wanted to do science, and he was distraught by their reaction. I think Amir is like 6 or 7, and I don't know if that's Ilah. I don't know how to pronounce the name, but I think Ilah, I think she was just turned 9. Whenever I babysit them, we do things like play chess, play video games, read books, or watch TV. When I tried to do science with them, they were like, no, I hate science. I'm bad at it. It sucked because I wanted to know why their confidence had been destroyed already at such a young age, Muhammad said. It was that moment that fueled him to create his nonprofit called Kids Cube, right? With a mission to introduce kids to science through fun, affordable, and accessible means. Damn, I wish I had that when I was in school. Right? Let me see. He said, I went into my room, I pulled out some science books, then I went online and did some research and was able to design some science experiments for them to do at home. The materials consisted of just stuff we had around the house, and they loved it. He said, after witnessing their joy, he realized other children could benefit from it as well. And then from there, he was going to start it just in Oakland, but decided to expand it. So you can check the article out, like I said, on AtlantaBlackStar.com. But this young brother is definitely trying to help transition kids into an appreciation for science. So shout out to him. And this is one of the reasons we put him forward in regard to the Sacred Black Masculine series. So to the brother Ahmed, shout out to you, sir. Okay, let's see. So next up, we have Hall of Famer Butch Beard of U of L. And his statement was, remove my name from everything. This is in Louisville, Kentucky. In a letter to the University of Louisville, President Dr. Neely Benda Pudi, former U of L basketball All-American Alfred Butch Beard asked the school to remove my name and accomplishments from any existing or future mention. Beard wrote that the university's commitment to young black men is far from what it should look like in 2021. Beard signed with Louisville in 1965, choosing the Cardinals over Kentucky, UCLA, and many other schools as the slate's Mr. Basketball from Breckinridge County. He was one of the first half-dozen African-American basketball players to commit to U of L, signing 1 year after former Seneca High School star Wes Unseld. Beard said that he was also upset that the school had not been more proactive in recognizing Unseld, the Hall of Famer who died last summer. Beard said he did not understand why the school has a statue to honor former U of L quarterback Johnny Unitas at Cardinal Stadium, but has not commissioned a similar honor for Unseld, a hometown star who changed the course of Louisville basketball. This is on www.wdrb.com in their sports section. But he nonetheless demanded that they extract all recognition of his achievements based on their treatment of black men, both one brother in a historical context and young black males in the present as it pertains to the school. So, shout out to him for that. AB Media, what's good? Good to see you in here. Urban, Miss Kalila, how you doing? So I hope everybody's well. Miss Daima, good to see you. Brother Enigma. So yeah, shout out to him for that. Appreciate that. That is a good look, as it were. Let's see. All right. Get in here. Okay, so I'm having some slight technical issues, so we will get it straight. Quick second. I don't know, man. I'm always spinning a few too many plates trying to keep things going. But we will get it together soon enough. So we're almost there, people. Peace to Two Triv, Eric the Red. What's going on? Good to have y'all in here. All right. Okay. So back there. All right. We getting it. All right. So y'all know this man right here. If you don't, you've probably been living under a rock. Billionaire philanthropist Robert F. Smith creates plan for HBCU loan repairment. This one, I'm going to go into it a little bit in terms of reading a good portion of it, because I think this is going to be something that may benefit a number of you out there, right? We got 90 people so far in here. So please like, share, and subscribe. Y'all know the deal. Robert F. Smith is a man of outreach and action. He made good on his pledge to pay off the student loan debt of Morehouse College's whole class of 2019. He's opening up a school in Denver modeled around HBCU principles. Read the details from Forbes on how the finance executive now plans to relieve even more HBU students. Oh, damn it. Not sure. There we go. All right. Sorry about that. How he plans to relieve more HBCU students of student loan debt in a new program. The latest student loan update on Capitol Hill is shaping up like this. Many in Congress are calling for $2,000 stimulus checks, which may be bad news for student loan forgiveness. The latest stimulus included limited student loan relief for student loan borrowers. It's unclear when or if you'll get a student loan cancellation. However, none of this has deterred Smith from finding innovative ways to help address student loan repayment. Smith, the CEO of Vista Equity, followed through on his pledge to pay off $34 million of student loans for approximately 400 students who graduated in 2019 from Morehouse. Now Smith wants to expand his student loan repayment effort to help students at historically Black colleges and universities through the nonprofit organization, the Student Freedom Initiative, which helps provide financial and career assistance for HBCU students, right? As part of this effort, which Smith helped fund with a $50 million contribution, the Student Freedom Initiative, SFI, is offering an innovative alternative to traditional student loans. Eligibility is based on being a rising college junior or senior at an eligible HBCU. This financing option is available for students to a student after they borrow the maximum amount of federal subsidized student loans, federal unsubsidized student loans, grants, and scholarships. The program is initially available at 9 HBUs and is expected to grow over time to additional HBCUs and minority-serving institutions. Students can borrow up to $20,000 a year, and student repayment, loan repayment, it's income-based. For every $10,000 of income that a borrower earns after graduation for a certain period of time, borrowers agree to pay 2.5% of their salary each month. If you earn less than $30,000 a year, you don't owe a student loan repayment. Let me restate that. If you earn less than $30,000 a year, you don't owe a student loan repayment. For example, if your monthly income is $12,000, you borrow $40,000, then you would owe 10% of your monthly income, or $1,200, as your monthly repayment. Your monthly repayment is returned to SFI, not your college or lender, which will use the proceeds to help future borrowers fund their education. Deferment and discharge. Borrowers can defer up to 12 months for any reason, and can discharge their payment obligations after 20 years or in bankruptcy, permanently disability, or death. Right. So this is an hbcubuzz.com. So, something to check out. Appreciate that, Damon. Y'all made Wesley smile. Good to see you in here, man. Hoping you're well. I don't have a link for it, but like I said, go to hbcubuzz.com. And you can check from there, or you can go to his nonprofit and see what information they may have up. But something to look into, right? Just something to look into. So, all right. Let's do it here. So, special shout outs. Y'all know the deal. Here we like to shout out people for various reasons. And in this particular instance, we have Mr. James Earl Jones, who turned 90 on January 17th, so about 3 days ago. The 90-year-old actor is still doing it, man. You know, I'm not going to read a piece on it. I just wanted to shout him out because his work has been so seminal. I've been a fan of James Earl Jones since I could process a television screen in my head. You know what I mean? So I loved him in most of the stuff I'd seen him in. So shout out to him, right? So definitely something to acknowledge. Not too many black men, well, at least these days, do we hear about reaching 90 years old, let alone having the cultural impact that he has had, right? So shout out to Mr. James Earl Jones, right? All right. So let us get into it. When I start the school semester tomorrow, so I'm a little, you know, I'm a little, I'm a little exhausted in advance for some reason. I'm not really ready for the semester to start, but it is what it is. So we're getting ready to go there. So I'm gonna be up all night getting some things ready in terms of that, and teaching bright and early. And so I've been trying to get it together and do a bunch of things, and at the same time try to keep up with some of the stuff that's happening. It's been a lot, but nothing that I'm actually want to complain about. Anyway, so current events. So we're going to go ahead and go in. Y'all have seen this, I'm pretty sure. This is an article that you can find on CNN.com. Trump's last minute pardons include Bannon, Lil Wayne, and scores of others, right? President Donald Trump issued a raft of 11th hour pardons and commutations early Wednesday that included his one-time political strategist, a former top fundraiser, and two well-known rappers, but not himself or his family. The batch of 73 pardons and 70 commutations issued in the final hours of his presidency was expected and is in keeping with a long-standing presidential tradition of exercising clemency powers at the last minute. The list reflected a president keen on awarding pardons to his stalwart allies, an unusual number of whom have been swept up in corruption or lying charges. The vast majority of the pardons and commutations on Trump's list were doled out to individuals whose cases have been championed by criminal justice reform advocates, including people serving lengthy sentences for low-level offenses. Lil Wayne received a pardon after pleading guilty to a gun possession charge in Miami. Kodak Black, a commutation after he pleaded guilty to a weapons charge. Trump also offered clemency to Paul Erickson, the conservative political operative and ex-boyfriend of alleged Russian spy Maria Butina, who pleaded guilty to wire fraud and money laundering charges. Robin Hayes, North Carolina political donor convicted of trying to bribe officials. Former Detroit Mayor Kwame Kilpatrick, I didn't see that one coming, convicted of federal charges including racketeering, extortion, and the filing of false tax returns, right? And a number of others. So something to check out there and keep up with. We got BGS in the building. What's up, man? The Geek Surgeon. Edward, what's going on? All right. Got a few people coming through. So, yeah. Definitely some new things. And between him and Biden, quite a bit of political activity is going on today, as we know. But this one was a little unexpected, most particularly Kwame Kilpatrick. So it'll be interesting to see what ends up happening there. But, it is what it is, right? It is what it is. That's all I can really say. But speaking of Biden, right? So we know that today he signed in a blizzard of executive orders that will reverse many of Trump's policies, right? This particular piece is on WashingtonPost.com, right? Biden to sign a blizzard of executive orders, right? President Biden is prepared to sign executive orders Wednesday that will lay out his coronavirus, immigration, and climate policies, launching a 10-day cascade of administrative actions aimed at reversing the policies of his Republican predecessor, right? So it's good to see that, some of the initiatives pertaining to Black folk are front and center on the agenda, like mass incarceration. You know, it's good to see that those things are on the front of the agenda because, you know, we did kick pretty hard to make sure that they were in office, right? And that was the whole goal. That was what we were told would work. So that's good, right? You like it, I love it. All right. Biden plans to ask the Education Department to consider extending a freeze on both interest and principal payments for federal student loans until September 30th, while requesting that the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention extend a moratorium on evictions that expires after this month to at least March. He will also ask three key agencies, the Department of Veteran Affairs, Agriculture and Housing, and Urban Development, to extend foreclosure moratoriums for federally backed mortgages under their purview through at least the end of March. And incoming White House officials emphasized the need for Congress to approve his larger relief package, which would extend unemployment benefits, dole out an additional $1,400 in stimulus payment for millions of Americans, and devote tens of billions of dollars to economic needs such as rental, housing, and food assistance, among other measures. On immigration, Biden will sign an order repealing the ban on travel from several majority Muslim nations while nullifying the Trump administration's directive that attempted to exclude the counting of non-citizens from the U.S. Census. Another action will call on the Department of Homeland Security to continue an Obama-era initiative protecting Dreamers from deportation and issuing them work permits as long as they qualified under the requirements laid out when the program, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, began in 2012. Biden will also end the national emergency over the border that Trump declared as a way to circumvent Congress when lawmakers would not grant him funding for his wall. So a number of other things, and of course it goes more in depth. What's up, Cox? How you been, man? I ain't seen you. Mike, Liang, good to see some people in here. The Geek Surgeon. Hope you guys are well. We are, and I apologize for not mentioning it. This is, on first and third Wednesdays, we are broadcasting from innerlightradio.com as well as Facebook and, of course, YouTube. So 137 watching. Please make sure you hit the like button, y'all. Subscribe, become members, and support the channel. All right. So let's see that. Right, Daima. Not really sure if reparations made the list, but I'm sure, it will sometime soon. I'm sure. Hopefully. Wow. Okay. Okay, I see what it is. Got to silence this one over here. Okay, and we got over 100 listening on Inner Light. Beautiful. Good to have you guys all here. All right, there we go. So this one here, you can find on bbc.com, entitled "Female Child Sex Abuse Remains Taboo While Victims Struggle." Right? Victims of female child sexual abusers face enormous stigma and shame, according to police and charities. Figures from BBC Radio's File on 4 show there were over 10,400 reports of this type of abuse from 2015 to 2019, equivalent to an average of 40 per week. Experts say there was still a lack of understanding about the extent of such abuse. The UK government said it would not allow any safe space for sex offenders to operate, male or female. Between 2015 and 19, the numbers of reported cases of female perpetrated child abuse to police in England and Wales rose from 1249 to 2297, an increase of 84%. Interesting. Dr. Andrea Darling, a criminal researcher at Durham University, who has looked at 40 cases of male and female teachers who sexually abused students, said the File on 4 figures represent the tip of the iceberg. Interesting. She said that although all child sexual abuse was underreported, there was a particular lack of understanding of the extent of female perpetuated abuse. That means that potentially abusive behavior that may have been picked up if the perpetrator had been a male is explained away, she said. I've been seeing that consistently in my research. So here's the thing. We've been saying this for years. Appreciate that, Solus. Appreciate the support. Um, all right, Kalanja Kala, thank you. Much appreciated. Um, we've been saying this for a couple of years now, for a number of years, and particularly those of us in Black male studies, right? When you look at Dr. Tommy Curry, when you look at Dr. Ron O'Neill, myself, we talk a lot about the ways in which sexual abuse and intimate partner violence, when it comes to male victims, often goes overlooked, right? It's rarely mentioned, and there's still a great deal of shaming that takes place. Now, although this particular article is dealing with Europe, the phenomena itself is not limited by any means. And I report on it regularly here at the Onyx Report, so you guys know I'm constantly putting up videos and articles about these kind of incidents, because even though the articles and the videos are made, they're not really profiled to any great degree. And one of the things I try to say is that boys and men are vulnerable to abuse, especially if people know going into the situation that boys and men, particularly men, are going to be considered guilty just at the accusation. And even if men call the police, can pretty much expect to be either misunderstood, have the situation misinterpreted, or they themselves in handcuffs, even though they themselves have been abused. So, as this article points out, even though there's an increase taking place, there's no fanfare about it, right? You have an 84% increase from 2015 to 19, which doesn't include 2020, obviously, right? But an 84. So, and I say that because during the pandemic, you got people stuck at home, right? So the question becomes, did those abuse record numbers go up in 2020? More than likely. But I tripped up on this article, let alone anything about. So I'm simply saying that, when it comes to looking at males as victims of sex abuse, victims of child abuse, when it comes to female aggressors, we have to change the culture. And this is not about denigrating women or focusing solely on women. I think there's an ample amount of attention in the last 50 years paid to male aggressors. Right? Male aggressors are the face of abuse, period. But when it comes to male victims, there's no conversation. And when you talk about post, Me Too culture, cancel culture, so to speak, no real acceptance of male victimization in regard to that. And that includes children. You can check all my shows last year, and it might be safe to say that I don't know, maybe over 90%, of my shows, you'll see me report on a case of, teachers sexually abusing students, right? Female teachers in particular, and usually more than one in a given episode, right? Even though I'm running up on them organically, I'm not even going out to look for these. I just find them organically. They just show up in my stream, And so when I report on them, one of the things I notice is even in the titling, they don't call it rape. They call it sex. I'm surprised the title of this article used abuse, but most of the time it'll say teacher has sex with student, right? 30-something-year-old teacher, 9 to 12-year-old boy. And I can tell you, I probably had a different perspective on this before I became a father. Changed a lot. So that said, I'm glad we're starting to see these articles come out, but this is the tip of the iceberg. Moado, what's up, man? Good to see you in here. All right. So y'all keep a lookout for this and don't let it slide by the wayside, right? This one is an interesting one. It's a little bit, it's older. I want to say it came out in 2019, but I didn't see it. So I thought I'd at least put it up here so that you can be made familiar with it, right? I think it's a 2019 article in New York Times. Drafting only men for the military is unconstitutional, judge rules. A military draft that applies only to men is unconstitutional. A federal judge in Houston has ruled, saying that excluding women is no longer justified because they can now serve in combat roles just as men do. Judge Gray H. Miller of Federal District Court in the Southern District of Texas took note of the Supreme Court's 1981 ruling that the exclusion of women from the military draft was fully justified because women then were not allowed to serve in combat. But the Pentagon abolished those restrictions in 2015, opening the way for women to serve in any military role for which they could qualify. Though no one has been conscripted into the United States military in more than 40 years, the Military Selective Service Act requires all American men to register when they turn 18 in case a draft is reinstated. They remain eligible through age 25. Men who do not register can be fined, imprisoned, and denied services like federal student loans. I haven't seen anything addressing this directly since. So if you find anything, please make sure you send it to me. You can go to my website, as you can see here on the page, thasanjohnson.com, and you can email me from there. Or if you're already on Facebook, you can shoot it to me. Let me know if you run across anything else. But I found this interesting, right? Found it interesting. Hadn't seen this too much. Oh wow! So I got a commenter who says she couldn't imagine learning her son was abused by his teacher. Oh yeah, be aware of it, definitely. All right, okay. So moving on. Yeah, this one you can also find in AtlantaBlackStar.com. Title of it reads: "Both their lives ended that night. Judge rejects state's request, grants chance of parole in 15 years to Maryland man who murdered black college student." The man who fatally stabbed a 23-year-old black man in 2017 was sentenced to life in prison Thursday. Sean Urbanski, I think that's how you pronounce it, 25, apologized in court for killing 23-year-old Richard Collins III at a bus stop in 2017. He told the victim's parents minutes before learning his sentence that he would go back and switch places with Collins if he could. Shit. On the night of May 17th stabbing, Collins was just 3 days away from graduating from Bowie State University and was visiting the University of Maryland College Park campus to celebrate. The newly commissioned second lieutenant in the Army was at a bus stop on the university's campus with two friends, an Asian woman and a white man, at around 3 a.m. When approaching, Urbanski told him, step left if you know what's best for you. When Collins replied no, Urbanski stabbed him in the chest with a 3-inch blade. Prosecutors claim Urbanski singled Collins out because of his race, but hate crime charges against the attacker were dismissed in 2019 before his first-degree murder conviction. Urbanski was a member of the alt-right Facebook group Alt-Right Nation and had at least 6 racist memes saved on his phone. Circuit Court Judge Lawrence Hill Jr., who dismissed the hate crime charges against Urbanski, acknowledged that race played a role in the attack. The judge ruled that prosecutors had not presented sufficient evidence to warrant allowing the jury to deliberate on a hate crime charge. The ruling happened before Maryland strengthened its hate crime law, so prosecutors don't have to prove hate is the only motivating factor in committing a crime. The change expanded the law to apply to crimes motivated either in whole or insubstantial by race and other factors. The judge denied the state's request for a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Both their lives ended that night. Hill said Urbanski could be eligible for parole after 15 years. Right. So he's a relatively young guy, right? 25. So meaning by the time he's 40, he can get out on parole for killing a man just because he was standing there or walking, right? Well, you can definitely see some foreshadowing in terms of our subject for tonight. So let's keep that on mind and bring it up as you see fit when we get into analyzing the film. But it definitely says something about Black life, Black male life in particular, where this is acceptable, right? Not much I'm going to say on this one. This one is, you can find on fandomwire.com, Michael B. Jordan returning for Black Panther 2. Not a lot of details about how, why, and what's going to happen. This, of course, goes hand in hand with the announcement made not long ago that they were not going to bring back the Black Panther character and just hire another actor. But we don't yet know how they're going to go about managing that. And you know that many of the people that are in my conversation sections, we support, even though we appreciate Chadwick Boseman, particularly as an actor and what he's brought to the table, that we don't think the Black Panther character should be retired. Nevertheless, Jordan is coming back, so we'll see what that means and how that goes. But as of yet, it is unclear, right? So something to keep in mind. We'll see what happens with it. This one I thought was interesting. Unruly. Mahershala Ali to star as legendary boxer Jack Johnson in HBO limited series. This one you can find on shadowandact.com. Mahershala has been attached to star in the upcoming HBO limited series titled Unruly. The project is described as an unapologetically black, no-holds-barred telling of Johnson's life. The first ever black heavyweight boxing champion, the show would follow Johnson's rise to greatness and the costs he paid for his skin color and defiance. It is based on Ken Burns' documentary Unforgivable Blackness, The Rise and Fall of Jack Johnson. That is an excellent documentary. By the way, if you haven't seen it, make sure you do. An excellent piece that I think would be good to add to your collection. To Triv, I appreciate the support on the Cash App. Thank you. So definitely check out that documentary if you haven't. Nevertheless, Ali has expressed interest in playing Johnson on the big or small screen for years. One of his first acting jobs was portraying the boxer in a stage production of The Great White Hope over 2 decades ago. Ali is under first look deal at HBO. And The Great White Hope, as we know, is a film starring James Earl Jones playing a character very much like famed boxer Jack Johnson. But there is nothing out like that documentary, Unforgivable Blackness, on the life of Jackson himself, narrated by Samuel Jackson. Excellent piece. If you get a chance to check that out, I would highly recommend that you do. Okay. Yeah, this is another one. This is a strange one, y'all. Las Vegas woman, 43, set fire to her dinner date's apartment and tried to kill him after he showed up at the restaurant with just $5 in his pocket. Las Vegas woman allegedly set fire to her friend's home, tried to kill him after he showed up to their dinner date with $5. Kimberly Marika Johnson was arrested Tuesday and faces charges of attempted murder and first-degree arson stemming from a fire she allegedly set at a home on October 11th, 2020 at about 5:30 a.m. According to an arrest report obtained by Las Vegas Review-Journal, Johnson had gone to meet the friend for dinner at Jerry's Nugget, a casino, earlier in the morning. At some point during the dinner, Johnson learned that the man, who has not been identified publicly, had only $5 with him, which led to the two having an argument. A North Las Vegas Fire Department investigator said in the arrest report. Johnson, the investigator reported, then made the man walk the 2.5 miles back to his apartment. It's unclear if he had been expected to return to the casino with more money or their dinner date had ended at that point. About 20 minutes after he arrived back at his apartment, however, the man heard a splashing sound on the window and front door. When the man opened the door, Johnson ignited the gas vapors. The front door and the mat are fully engulfed in flames, the fire investigator wrote in the report. The man, who lived in a 2-story apartment complex, then slammed the burning front door shut. Johnson was said to have then used a wooden-handled hammer to break the front window at the bottom level of the apartment. Dinner date claimed that Johnson threw her purse, which was on fire, through the broken window and into the front room of the apartment. According to the arrest report, the man said that Johnson was high on crystal meth and said she had attempted to burn me down. The fire at the man's house was determined to have been set with willful and malicious intent. It's unclear if there are any injuries suffered during the incident. Online jail reports indicate Johnson is being held on $5,000 bail. and is due back in court on the morning of January 25th. This is in dailymail.co.uk. I mean, there's been a few of these cases, that I've been reporting on over the last year. There was a case of the man who he called a woman over to his house late one night and fell asleep. And because he didn't answer the door, the woman who he had called over was offended, set his house on fire. I mean, there's been a few of these. This is ridiculous. Yeah, absolutely. His name, the crystal meth adds clarity, but see, that's why I'm bringing up the other cases, because there wasn't use of crystal meth. So there's more that tends to happen with these than not. You don't have to be on crystal meth for this to happen, unfortunately. Sister Warrior, that's cold. I ain't said it. Yeah, that it is what it is. But this is what men have to be very careful of. This type of retribution, and at the end of the day, no matter what you think about whether or not men in particular should come to the date prepared, the type of treatment that men in particular, black men in particular, can receive is above and beyond. And again, there have been a number of these cases I've talked to you about in the last year, cases where men have come home, found their wives cheating, and that's happened a couple of times. I reported on during the show. One man tried to leave, pack his bags, and his wife, who was actively cheating on him when he walked in the house, she shot him, right? And then managed to get out of jail before he had finished healing from getting shot by her, right? We really don't have an understanding of how to perceive women fundamentally as being human, in the sense that humanity includes both the positive and the aspirational sides of the human spirit, but as well the capacity to commit acts of violence, injustice, oppressive acts, violations of securities and trust. We don't really know how to make sense of women that commit such acts. So we tend to have a one-way aggression, both in our legal system as well as in the court of public opinion, about how men should be treated and regarded, right? So in many of these cases, I mean, look, you don't want to believe me. Let's just flip the script. Woman comes to a date, doesn't bring any money at all, and we all know that for the most part, it is socially acceptable for women to not have any money, to not come with any preparedness to pay for anything. That's socially acceptable, right? If a man decided to set a woman's house on fire because she didn't bring enough money to a date, this wouldn't be on some back page somewhere. How many of you, I mean, I'm more than sure that most of you listening to this broadcast only heard about this because I just read it to you. It's not like it was on the front page of anything, but I can guarantee you, especially if it was a black man, he set some woman's house on fire because she didn't come prepared to have a date. Or let's flip it. If she didn't want to have sex with him after the date and he decided to set her house on fire, he'd be front page news. But we don't know how to account for female aggression. And so most of the time, we tend to deny the issue altogether, right? So just keeping that in mind, these things do happen. They are not limited to the use of crystal meth, but it is what it is. So be on the mind, be mindful of this, and fellas, definitely be careful who you take out. Appreciate that, Cornbread. Welcome. Glad you became a member. All right. Let's see here. This one got a lot of argument on my Facebook page. You can find it on blackenterprise.com. The title is Just Do It. Nike invests $500,000 in black women through Black Girl Ventures. The company recently announced a $500,000 investment to Black Girl Ventures, an organization committed to funding and scaling tech-based businesses founded by black and brown women entrepreneurs. Nike's funding will help us grow our reach through new chapter development, increasing our technology infrastructure to better serve Black and Brown leaders through our proprietary crowdfunding platform and increase our brand visibility through storytelling campaigns curated by Black and Brown women, says Shelley Bell, founder and CEO of Black Girl Ventures, in a statement released Tuesday. Founded in 2016, Black Girl Ventures started with crowdfunded pitch competitions. To date, the organization has funded 76 women of color. They've also hosted over 25 Black Girl Ventures pitch programs. Black Girl Ventures continues to be a valuable resource by providing corporate mentoring programs, supplier diversity initiative, change agent program, and online community to help more women gain access to capital and community building opportunities. Keep that in mind, right? To help women gain access to capital and community building opportunities. Nike's focus on economic advancement through entrepreneurship can be a game changer for Black and Brown communities. According to the 2019 State of Women-Owned Businesses report, African American women made an average of $24,000 in annual revenue. Unfortunately, this presents the lowest numbers for any demographic of women. In comparison, all women-owned businesses reported annual revenue numbers of $142,900. This isn't the end of Nike's commitment to Black entrepreneurs. The company announced it would be sharing additional plans in the upcoming weeks. Nike is ready to help close the opportunity gap that exists for Black Americans. Now, I don't have a problem with Black Girl Ventures. I'm not suggesting that they shouldn't be financed. But since the onset of the pandemic, one of the things that I have been vocally adamant about is the lack of support for Black male entrepreneurs. In the last year here on the Onyx Report, what we've talked about, one of the questions I've consistently asked is how many of you have seen targeted programming looking to finance Black male entrepreneurs? We've seen such financing in regard to extended on the base of race, gender, and being Black and female. I've seen grants extended to Black women photographers, drummers, it's media producers. It is what it is. How many of you have seen any for Black men? Anything? This is the demographic that is, overrepresented in incarceration, at least since the late 1970s. All right. Coming out of prison, often unable to find traditional forms of employment. Hell, often unable to get housing. Thank you for that, Mo. B-Mo, appreciate the support. All right. Unable to find housing even. Black men with vouchers are often unable to actually be able to secure housing simply because they are Black men. And yet we all accept this as a given, right? We don't think much of it. But we allow for this to exist, and we basically, and this is something that men will say themselves, we just have to muscle up. You know what I mean? We just have to make it happen. And that's we've been kicking that rhetoric from, because it's all we have. So I get it. Iron sharpens iron. You know what I mean? We got to strengthen and motivate each other. Sometimes that comes in the form of chiding. Sometimes it comes in the form of, particular types of masculine performances that suggest that we're not vulnerable. We don't need institutional support. The irony is one of the various figures that often inspire us as entrepreneurs, or even just, Black men participating in this system. We're inspired by key individuals who are extremely well off, right? And many of those individuals actually were able to benefit from some type of structural support, inheritance, access to capital, government, policies being adjusted in their favor. So the irony is we are inspired by, elite figures. Sometimes, and many a time, they're not even Black, right? Who've been able to achieve because of support structures we don't see, while telling each other that we need to ignore the fact that we don't have them and just push on, which is what it is. But when we start to see something extended during the pandemic, it is not extended to you. How do you reconcile that? I've had Black men write into the Onyx Report and tell me that they had to apply for support through a sister or a cousin, or some people have even had to hire women just to be the face of their programs so they can get basic access to the same kind of capital that others are getting in this economy, right? It's absolutely ridiculous. And yet, nobody has a problem with it. So when I posted this on Facebook, one of the things I was saying is, of all places, right, that should be looking to support Black men, I would think that Nike, who has profited off of Black men in particular for decades now, should be the first. What I was told was by a couple of brothers who wrote in that because Nike hires Black men and has millionaire celebrity endorsers, hawking their shoes, that is the equivalent, and we should be quiet because they more than support enough Black men. I would say they more than use enough Black men, but more than that, I don't equate millionaire celebrity, endorsements as the same thing as supporting small business or small level entrepreneurs in the midst of a pandemic. I don't equate the two. And I haven't yet seen anyone invest directly in Black men, and I want to. But I'm more than incensed at how often nobody says anything about it. Nobody. I was told that, instances such as these are good for the community and that I should be quiet and just support the community. What happens when the community itself, including Black men, don't support Black men? What happens when we accept the fact or the idea that Black men shouldn't get support? Because they don't need it, right? Because they have an advantage in terms of, I can't think of what the advantage is, but you tell me. What's the advantage? What do Black men get that others don't? That necessitates them not receiving philanthropic or government support, government-based support, especially in regard to small business. We already know over 90% of Black businesses have one employee. 99% of Black women's businesses have one employee, right? But none of us have capital. And yet Black men have an experience with being overrepresented in terms of incarceration, and that tends to have a lifelong impact in terms of what you're able to do, how you're able to move in society, getting an education, right? Getting a bank loan. Seeing a lot of brothers coming out of the pen getting that. So we have small scale entrepreneurship where people are depending on whatever means they have to support themselves. And you consider the high rates of unemployment, sometimes over 40 and 50% for Black men in certain urban areas, right? When you consider all of those factors pre-COVID, does that mean Black men suddenly and magically don't need any support? And why is it that nobody's saying anything about it? This is the kind of thing that incenses me, and it makes it hard for me to appreciate what I was told about being quiet and just celebrating the women. See, the argument is that if I critique that this one-way advantage is a problem, that I must hate women. I understand that these are structural. This strategy is not arbitrary. It's not accidental. And it's not necessarily something, I'm not arguing that women are going out here and making this occur in this way, right? But I will say, I ain't heard no complaints from the most educated demographic in the country, let alone the most educated demographic in the Black community. I have heard no complaints about the bifurcated treatment of capital being extended on grounds of entrepreneurship. I've heard nothing. Nothing. But more than that, at the end of the day, this is larger than entrepreneurship or the extending of capital. This has to do with the treatment of Black males over the decades. Appreciate that, Rashid, right? This has to do with the treatment of Black males going on multi-generationally, right? And we've come to accept it as a norm. It's just kind of a given, right? And this goes to what we've been saying for the longest. When you talk about Black men, And you talk about the idea that black men themselves are raised with the notion that they are lesser beings, but even lesser beings than their women. And when our women are raised to believe that they are fundamentally better beings than their own men, this is an acceptable form of treatment. Now, I know that sounds like hyperbole, right? It can't be that way because people don't directly use that language. But I grew up in an era where niggas ain't shit and all of that, where it was common parlance, right? It was common. It was commonly heard. Now you factor in that what is it nearly 80%, black children raised in single parent households that are majority female. Only about 2 to 4% are male led households. Then you factor in that over 90% of the teachers from K through 12 are female. And if you go through college and grad school, the numbers don't vary. It's still predominantly female. What I'm saying to you is the way many black families, the way children are socialized, they're socialized primarily by women from birth. If you go, Barry, appreciate that. If you go from birth through, let's say, grad school, if you got somebody that went straight through like I did, yeah, you're socialized mainly by women from birth all the way to you complete grad school. And so the idea that black men are lesser, it's easy to perpetuate that in a structure where men have very little say over what children are able to internalize. Their very participation in the family, especially post-divorce, is often negotiated by her and her proxy capacity to leave him at an arm's length distance using the courts. That's a lot of power. And it brings us to a moment where boys especially are often told what manhood is based on what women tell him about it. And often what I found, especially as a child, what you tend to get, especially from mothers, you don't really get an idea of manhood per se. You get an idea of what type of man she wants. And so as a young man, you try to become that. You try to emulate it. You don't know how the inner workings of it go. You just kind of learn the outside performance of it. Anyway, my point simply being, when we really get down to it, we have to be able to shift the way black men are seen. And if it doesn't happen from within the community, as one could argue it already is, will be in peril. And I don't care whether you're talking about the family as an institution, or whether you're talking about organizations. I don't care what entity you're talking about. If we do not deal with the intense and low boiling contempt for black men and the ongoing misandry for black men within the community itself, nothing will work. I don't care if you're a staunch conservative or a hardcore Pan-Africanist, it will all fall apart. Shout out Cornbread, appreciate the support again. It will all fall apart. I don't care what your philosophy, I don't care what your organization is. If you do not deal with this particularly radical, bent of feminism that's so widely accepted that we don't even use a name to refer to it as, we don't deal with this kind of misandry and low boiling contempt, because I'm gonna tell you, with the younger generations, there's already a shift. When I look at the boys, I'm telling you, it's already a shift. The contempt they are already familiar with. And when I talk to the young boys that I'm whether you're talking my son's age or in college, when I have conversations with them, they are already resolved about things. And in the next 30 years are not going to be pretty unless there is a serious mass shift in the community, most particularly, to reassess its treatment of black men and boys. But that's just me. Y'all tell me if I'm tripping. You can dismiss what I'm saying, right? Because that doesn't matter. I mean, after all, it's just another black male talking. You don't have to listen to him. Anyway, this is what we're dealing with. So we're going to take a quick little break because I would like for you to support a couple of things. So let's start with the first one in honor of my brother Green Gorilla. If you haven't checked out the Green Gorilla channel, make sure you do so. He is on the push to create a documentary that will expose a lot of this and at least give you an understanding of why Black men, of all people, are as frustrated as they are. And it isn't getting movie treatment. It isn't getting media treatment for the most part. Most people don't know until you run into it. So let's check out what my brother Green Gorilla is trying to do.
I told you to do Biden. Now we done lost a damn vote. We done lost a vote. That's gonna go to Trump. God damn.
I mean, when you mention black people, you mentioning black women. So don't count yourself out.
No, that's not true.
Y'all make sure that you go ahead and support the channel, but also try and make sure you also look out for my recent venture started November 18th. And that is the Institute for Black Male Studies. Currently, we have our introductory class that's up. You can take that at any time. Courses are right there in the website. So make sure you go to the Institute website. You can see it there, instituteforblackmalestudies.com. There's a 3-part webinar that is also available, and there will be quite a bit of content coming out in the next month that I'll have posted, some of which will be free, some of which will be paid. But please support the Institute. It is the only of its kind, the only place you're going to find Black male studies outside of the Institute that we have here is in Scotland, right? With Dr. Tommy Curry at the University of Edinburgh. We're lucky if you have a class that deals with Black men at, most campuses. There might be, if you have an Africana Studies department or program, most of the time they're programs, they're not full departments. But when you go to a program, you're lucky if you'll find a class. And that's not necessarily to guarantee that they're using Black male studies as a framework. That's just a class on Black men, and that can be anything. And much of the narrative on even how to think about or talk about gender or study gender as in regard to the academy, it's usually rooted in a Black feminist orientation, right? Most of our analyses and theories on gender have a context that stems out of Black feminism. So again, much of the discourse can kind of follow that line. But Black male studies has created its own lane, has its own theory, and has developed, and usually, if done in alignment with what Black male study scholars are doing, takes up the work of like my colleague, Dr. Tommy Curry, and challenges what's referred to as the subculture of violence theory. And the subculture of violence theory basically argues that Black men are walking stereotypes and caricatures, because that's what the racist scholarship of the 50s through the 70s articulated, and in many ways, what early Black feminists internalized in their work in the late 70s and 1980s. They used the subculture of violence theory as the starting point to define Black men. You can see my show about that, my last interview with Dr. Tommy Curry, where he went into detail about how this theory developed, right? And what it did to the perception of Black men in the academy as it pertains to gender studies. And by the time you get to the early 1980s, with people like Oprah, she began to open the spigot on this obscure radical Black feminism that, and I don't mean radical in any kind of positive way, that saw Black men as caricatures, and she translated it into popular media. So now you had people that use these talking points and perspectives where Black men were monsters, right? Who had actually never read a Black feminist text. They didn't have to. They may not have ever even heard of some of the primary Black feminists of the day, and yet still knew what these talking points were. Give you an example. My grandmother-in-law, bless her, may she rest in peace. She told me once, she said to this day, she had a vivid hatred, or I should say to this day, in terms of when she passed a few years ago, she had a vivid hatred of the actor Danny Glover because he played Mr. in Color Purple. She didn't say she had a hatred for Mr. She had a hatred for Mr. and Danny Glover. And I say that because that idea that Mr., who somehow was worse than slavery, you had this man living in a 2-story house with large acreage during Reconstruction or whatever. Anyway, that character who superseded slavery in terms of the oppression of black women was somehow representative of black men as a category. That became acceptable. And thus, in the long run, became the impetus behind the need for the Institute for Black Male Studies. But it needs support and it needs patronage. I need you to actually, go to the website, sign up with your email so we can get you on the subscription list and take a class. And there will be more classes put on. I can only go at a certain speed, but I am kind of upping my production quality and getting the tools I need to be able to create more. So as I do that, there'll be more to offer. But in the meantime, I hope you'll support. All right. And if you can, if nothing else, one way you can support is to check out the merchandise. Right, you can go to the merchandise store on the website, and you can see the various items available. So you can support that way as well. All right. So now we get to it. All right. We're going to talk about Nate Parker's latest film, American Skin. Came out a few days ago, and you can pretty much find it. I watched it on Amazon Video. You can check it out there, right? And there's a lot to cover. I'm gonna try and get it all. I shouldn't have to say spoilers, but I always get somebody who's mad. We going through spoilers. If you don't want to, if you don't want spoilers, don't. You can check out because we're gonna go there. But let me see here. Oh man. All right. Here, I'll put it up. So this is a film made by the same gentleman who gave us Birth of a Nation. Highly controversial, right? Young director, filmmaker, and actor. And mainly because of a case that went back to his early days in undergrad, I think at the University of Pennsylvania, where he was nevertheless absolved of the crime in a court of law with a predominantly white jury. But he was tried in the court of public opinion a little bit later, and yet that did not go well. So, tried in the court of public opinion years later, it was he was perceived as having been guilty of the crime, and thus his career, for the most part, was damn near canceled until he was able to continue putting out films. Now, Birth of a Nation was a film that he made and sold before it went public, right? So he was able to sell it and make a profit off it without having to necessarily hope that people went to the theater in order for the film to kind of do anything. But I put pictures online. As a matter of fact, if you go to my blog, which is blackmasculinities.wordpress.com, one of the things you'll find is that when I did an article going to see the movie, I posted pictures because I went to see it a couple of different times. And I posted pictures of the theater that I went to see it in each time. And the theaters were empty. And I mean that literally. Now, to put that into context, I do live in Fresno. So it's not like there was a tidal wave of people who were coming to, I'm not going to make that argument. Nevertheless, though, it was much more void of presence than I would have imagined. Right. So that said, oh crap. All right, there we go. I would have expected more, but there was very little. Nevertheless, this is a film that stars Nate Parker, Tony Espinoza, who plays his son Kajani. And if you remember Birth of a Nation, Tony was young Nat Turner. So he played Nat Turner as a boy. This time he's about 14, and he plays the son of Nate Parker's character, Link. So his name is Kajani Jefferson, and you have Link as the father. The mother's played by the mother Tayana, the character's name, is played by Milana Jefferson. If I didn't mess that up, I think that should be her name. I'm only confused about that because the character's name was Jefferson, so I hope I didn't miswrite that, but I believe that's correct. Milana Jefferson plays Tayana, who is the mother of Kajani, who gets killed. The grandmother's played by Vanessa Bell Calloway, who I had not seen in a while, so it was interesting to see her back in the throes of acting. I don't think she entirely disappeared, but nevertheless, she's back to it. Let me see. Omar, Link's best friend, as you can see right here in the center, was played by Amari Hardwick. So I'm glad to see this brother's career is taking off after Ghost. He's so far done a horror movie that I did a review on called Spell, and then we also see him in here in American Skin, and he did well. He did well. I'm glad to see that his career is taking off. You have Michael Warren, who played the uncle, Melvin, and then you have Shane Paul McGee, who's pictured right here on the right, plays a documentary maker in the film named Jordan, and Wolfgang Bodison as Captain Eugene Morris. He's not pictured on the screen, but I actually hadn't seen him since the oh man, what was the name of that movie? Man, everybody was talking about it for years. Damn it, Tom Cruise, Demi Moore. What's the film, y'all? Help me out. Court movie. You Can't Handle the Truth. Anyway, if you get a chance to see that, he plays the young brother who is the actual who the court case is about. Really, I haven't seen him since then, but he plays the police captain here in American Skin. All right, 220 watching. Again, like, share, subscribe. Please support the channel. All right. So in this, basically the story, as I'm sure most of you may know, is that Kajani, the 14-year-old son of Link, played by Nate Parker, is killed when the police pull them over for driving. Basically, they're accused of speeding. They're driving through an affluent white neighborhood, a suburb, late at night, and Link does not have the most current insurance paperwork. So the police ask him to step out the car. And from there, thank you. A few good men. Appreciate that. Cox, Malika, thank you. Fetty, Sheed, appreciate that. Right. West Coast. Yeah. So anyway, having been pulled over, they're asked to get out the car. Kajani, who has recently began to study, Black history, Black politics. He seems to have a penchant for Malcolm, and he's becoming more and more intense, more and more radical, more and more politically aware. In this instance, he actually decides to film. Right, he decides to pull out his camera. He's familiar with the law that he's able to record by law. Yet and still, the police officer approaching the passenger side where he is takes issue with that, tells him to put the phone down, and of course, an altercation ensues, and Kajani is shot 3 times. Right, and with that, when they do, and they flash back to it several times in the film, and what you do end up seeing, of course, is that he dies, and the father lets out a scream that, as a father, I can't ever forget. In terms of that. Godbody says it's on Fire Stick. Okay, yeah, I saw it on Amazon on the Fire Stick. So yeah, check it out, people. Anyway, so from there, a year later, the movie picks up with the documentary filmmakers coming to Link's house to get a sense of what happened on the day that they're going to hear whether or not there'll be charges, whether or not there'll be a sentence for the police officer who's at the top right of the screen here. And I'll pull up his name in a moment. But I think I remember him from a boxing movie. Anyway, so they're going to see if there are charges that are going to be filed because of the unjust killing of this young black male. And as we are very used to, there were none, right? They decided that there was nothing that was egregious. He received no charges. And from there, all hell breaks loose. And there's a riot across the city, right? Or an uprising. And from there, a black police captain shows up at the mother's house. The mother is Tayana again. And from there, they ask her to help quell the violence, which is something that Mari Hardwick's character, Omar, identifies. He talks about that and he says that this is kind of one of the tactics they tend to use, which is to get the mother to quell the violence by asking people to calm down, right? And that does not work. Of course, there's a small argument that takes place right there in the house with one of Kajani's cousins and the police captain. So from there, there's actually a scene where the mother is quite frustrated after the ruling, and she begins to get into an argument with a police officer that Link has to grab her and pull her away from. And from there, you kind of see them reeling with the judgment from there. I think the actor's name is Bo Knapp. I think that's the cop who's in the top right of the image. So anyway, Link then goes on a bit of a tirade that seems strategized to some extent, and what he ends up doing is kidnapping the police captain, and he and his boys, all of whom are war veterans, Iraqi war veterans, taking over the police department. So you see them armed to the teeth, machine guns, armor, the whole deal, and they manage to take over a police department without any bloodshed. And from there, and I'm just giving you the short story for now. They are able to shut down the station and lock all the police officers down and release some of the prisoners. Not necessarily full release, but release to participate in this bit of a social experiment. What they decide to do is hold an impromptu court right there in the police station, with civilians being treated as, jury, and the police officers kind of held in silence while the main cop who killed Kajani being on trial, right? So this is basically what it's about. Looking at the responses, I looked at a few critiques. There were all kinds of criticisms about whether or not the film was consistent or clear. Some people argued it jumped from here and there, and what I found is that for the most part, black folk, didn't seem to have a whole lot of problem with the film until you got to the end. And basically, what tended to happen at the end of the film, so they do the court case right then and there, and they assign a jury of random people who happen to be in the police department that day, with determining whether or not the police officer that killed Kajani was guilty. Right, an impromptu court case right on the spot. Link played the prosecutor, and the cop. Now, this actor is named Theo Rossi, and you've seen him in a couple other things, especially if you saw the Luke Cage series. That's him pictured in the middle on the left. He's another cop, and he decides to play kind of like the defending attorney. And so they go back and forth about whether or not Kajani, whether there was a cause for concern. And after a very tense set of arguments and an examination of the evidence, the cop in question admits to profiling both of the men who drove through, the intersection and were arbitrarily accused of speeding in order to get through. And with that, it is determined that he's guilty. And so this is the critical moment, right? So the buildup of the film, right? First, you see a black family having to endure their child being killed, and then having to further endure the injustice of the police officer not being held accountable for that. Go somewhere different than we actually get to see in real life. A group of black men, veterans, use their skills to take over the police department, right? And put the man on trial for his crime, a trial that the people are in charge of and not the courts. And so what you find at the end of this experiment is that the people found him to be guilty. And at that moment, Link, again, Nate Parker's character, allows the cop to call his family. That's where I knew the shit was going to go left. As soon as I saw the little kid, I knew they weren't going to hold him accountable because for the most part, they don't do that, right? They humanize the police officer to that degree, which isn't in and of itself, shouldn't necessarily have to be a deterrent, but I knew they weren't going to kill him the moment they humanized him, just in terms of how films tend to play out. And sure enough, Link puts a gun to his head, pulls the trigger, no bullet. The cop, of course, cries, and everybody is tense and whatever. There is a moment, however, where before they come to that judgment, the elder gentleman pictured in the middle at the bottom here, Melvin, who is along with all the other veterans who are my age, really, Generation X. He comes along and he has a gun on his hip. And upon a fight that breaks out with one of the prisoners and the cop, who I'm assuming arrested him, upon helping the older white cop get off the ground, the cop pulls the gun off his hip and there's shots fired. And the only one that gets shot is Melvin, right in the shoulder. And so there's an interesting kind of moment there where Melvin, although shot, doesn't want to go to a hospital because he's actually, as he put it, he's there, of course, for what happens. And I wanted to I wrote this down because what he said was interesting. So here he is. He's shot. They're trying to decide what to do. They're putting his wound back together, trying to get him secure. And he says, "I've been around a long time." And he's talking to Link. He said, "But because of you, I get to live. I ain't going nowhere." Right. And so there's this moment that, that takes place with the uncle and Link, where I realized that this is an attempt to be a multi-generational film. The uncle plays the baby boomer. Most of the men around Link and his boys, they're all Generation X for the most part. And then you have millennials, right? So there's this multi-generational and Generation Z, right? So documentary makers are millennials, it looks like, and then you have Kajani and his friend who are I think Generation Z for them. So it's an attempt to have a multi-generational kind of conversation, really framed around black male death at the hands of police homicide. And so with that, issues of racism, sexism, all of that is explored in the course of this conversation. And for the most part, it's kind of a strange series of experiences. Black Uru, appreciate that support, right? And so with that, again, you get to the point where Link has the opportunity to kill the cop who shot his son. And he exercises what you tend to expect in many black movies, forgiveness, right? He doesn't kill him. But he does make sure that the documentary team that comes to interview him stay with them throughout the entire time that they're going through this particular, trial, right? That they're taking over the police station. He keeps the documentary team with them. And it suggests that he strategized this from the beginning, that they would be present and that they would go from there. And his big concern, as he tells them, is that they keep recording no matter what. By the time you get to the point where he lets the cop up, and I do have to say, I'm skipping over a lot. There were some interesting moments. Some of the most interesting dialogue actually came from the prisoners who were the jury arguing with the police officers, right? Some very interesting exchanges that take place in that. But again, after all is said and done, he doesn't kill the cop and he lets everybody go. And upon letting everybody go, when they come out of the precinct, Link is shot by presumably a sniper in the head. And that's the end of the film. Most of the brothers that I saw responding to it were incensed at the end. Because it had I think what it was, for the most part, is there was an opportunity. There was a serious opportunity to tell a different kind of story. And it came close and then shifted directions. Right? Shifted directions. It could have gone there, but it kind of didn't. Hold on one second here. I want to make sure I didn't skip over anything. I appreciate that, TD Hip Hop Media. Appreciate you becoming a member. Welcome to the Onyx Report, Brotherhood. So let me see. Want to make sure I didn't skip over anything pertinent. As I said, I am summing up a lot. You'd have to kind of see it because there are some nooks and crannies here and there. There are things that I thought were okay, and there were things that I didn't like, obviously. And I definitely want to get people's feedback and whatnot. But there were a couple of things that I did want to point out. Now, there were complaints that the character development wasn't done right, and there were elements that I thought were convincing. Particularly going back to Amari Hardwick, I thought his character was profound. It was interesting. So basically, this is all he and Link meet in the military. I think they both joined the Marines and went to war, in Iraq. And he basically, when you meet him at the beginning of the film, you find out that he has cancer, and he explains that it was his last day getting treatment, but not because the treatment regimen is completed, but because he's decided to not go through it anymore. He's basically decided to die. So you're dealing with somebody who's fairly black pill. I mean, he's prepared to die. He sees the world in terms of what he's experiencing. He takes reality for what it is, and his engagement, you can kind of tell, is linked to an appreciation for Kajani. You get the sense that there was likely a relationship there, but more than anything, he's supporting his friend. And I thought the relationship between Omar and Link was actually, pretty convincing. There was definitely a love there. And what you find toward the end was there was a kind of a black pill resonance with both of them, to the extent that both men were prepared to die, and they knew they were. So it was interesting to that degree. Let me see here. Okay. So Omar's character I thought was interesting. Let's see. Yeah, what else? Kajani was a little more. They did do some character development with him a little bit, which was good, because usually what you tend to find when it comes to black male victims of police homicide, you may see a picture and that's kind of it. They're never drawn in any kind of three-dimensional way, and they attempted to do that with Kajani here. They showed him to be a young male. So basically what it is Link puts his son into what looks to be a well-to-do white private school, and he takes a job as a janitor at the school to get his son in, right? So he's trying to make sure that his son Kajani has options that he didn't have. And from there, he's attending this school. He's just starting it. He's kind of talking to his father about the differences between what it is to go to a black school and a white school. But one of the things he comes across is the study of the law. And he's fascinated and a bit idealistic and naive about the capacity of using the law as a black male. And so in a particular key moment in the film, he and one of his boys are having a discussion about what is legal in terms of what you can do in regard to the police. And Link walks in on this conversation and has a conversation with them about it. So Kajani and his friend are talking about this, and Kajani is saying, by law, right, you can have an altercation with a police officer if you're being unjustly treated. And the boys are kind of debating that when Link walks in and basically tells them, at the cost of your life, it's not worth it. You don't get to live by the same laws that are written on the books as everybody else. And so he has that kind of discussion that if you are a black father or mother, for that matter, you probably had with your son at some point. So that, pretty much came from what black men, end up having to do every day. Explain to your child that you are technically a citizen, but not. The capacity for your access to the law does not generally work in your favor much of the time, right? So with that, we find that Kajani tends to be drawn toward Malcolm's work, and you can see him starting to take on that kind of righteous indignation and anger about this mistreatment, particularly of black males, right? So Kajani is becoming politically aware in that respect, but he's very early on in this experience. It's still fairly new, and he doesn't understand the capacity by which that can be turned against him. What else? Let's see. There was an exchange between two of the Latino characters, one being a prisoner and one being the cop, Theo, played by Theo Rossi. That was interesting, but I don't speak Spanish and they didn't give us subtitles. And I don't really understand that because this is the second black film to do that. They did this with Superfly. They have these exchanges with characters who are speaking Spanish, but they don't provide these subtitles. But even if you don't speak Spanish, I will say, as ignorant as I was about what they were actually talking about, you can draw, you can infer some of the arguments going back and forth, where the prisoner is considered to be some kind of gangbanger, and of course the cop, and they go back and forth about who is really doing detriment to the Latino community. So it was an interesting exchange there for the most part. But here's the thing. I think the biggest part to this that frustrated people, as I said, was the end. And this question of whether black men can ever really tell a story that doesn't try to appease others. Now, here's the thing. So the film itself, if it ends with a cop's death, I'm not completely sure if the film gets put on, it gets put out for distribution. Not sure. The film I couldn't help but compare it to was Spook Who Sat by the Door, because I've been asking for years whether or not you can get a Spook Who Sat by the Door in 2020, in the contemporary era. Can you get a Spook Who Sat by the Door? And those of you who are not familiar with that film, right? This is a film that came out in the very early 70s based on the book. And the idea behind the film is you had a man who is joining the FBI and takes what he's learned from the FBI after about 5 years, goes into the hood, trains young black men in the hood to become grassroots revolutionary army, black liberation, kind of army. And they wage war. They raise arms. And they spread across the entire country. They use the underworld. They use, they take over. And from that, at the end of the film, even though the brother who starts it is injured, and we don't know if he survives, it is inferred that the revolution is implied. The revolution continues on, and the streets are engulfed in flames. Now, the film itself, for the most part, is an excellent story about how the film even got to theaters. And when you listen to people who were alive at that time to go and see it, whether you're talking about the likes of Robert Townsend or even our own BGS, it was only in theaters for 2 weeks. The film was not supposed to ever see the screen, but the way they did it is when they got this. First of all, Sam Greenlee was the writer of the book Spook Who Sat by the Door, and he was present for the filming of the film. And what they did is they did it guerrilla style. They didn't get licenses from the city. They basically just filmed scenes wherever the hell they wanted to. And when they went to an actual film company to have the film distributed, they only showed the company like car chases, action scenes. And so many films were being put up at that time during the blaxploitation era that they greenlit the film and they put it out. Problem, however, was they didn't watch it. And when it hit theaters after about 2 weeks, they pulled every single copy of that film from movie theaters and around the entire country. The only way the film ever saw the light of day again is when Ivan Dixon, who I believe directed the film, if I remember the story properly, mislabeled the film in the archives on purpose. And then in the early now up through the 1990s, at least in Los Angeles, there was like one copy at Blockbuster Video. I don't know how it got there, but it didn't matter. It was never there. Appreciate the support, Illuminati. Right? You never got to see it, but people bootlegged it. You kind of got to see it over the years that way. And then eventually Sam Greenlee was able to get a copy and started selling it out of his own backpack, on DVD. And you can still find it on Amazon or other, platforms. I suggest you get it, check it out. This is American Skin, kind of is part of the same genre. It's part of the same genre. And what it basically tries to do is build off the notion of what black men could do if they decided to, right? But it goes against convention. And with this, it falls short of the genre that Spook Who Sat by the Door, kind of creates or builds. It falls short because it's almost like they didn't have the courage to show the possibility. They were more concerned with maintaining respectability politics to some extent and making sure that the black community, as filtered through Link's experience, maintains the moral high ground, right? By having the moral high ground, you don't kill a cop, you don't really do anything that's too egregious. Basically, Link is a character who knew, in my assessment, who knew he was going to die and brought a documentary team to record everything so that people could see how the injustice, of what happened to his son continued on unabated. He wanted to have a moral argument put on film at the cost of his own life. Right? In this militaristic context where you have this team of black men armed to the teeth, military training, and nothing really happens. And I understand it. After the last year, tensions are high. Thank you for that support, BP. Right? Tensions are high. People are afraid of what can end up happening. We saw uprisings and riots happening all across the country. Right? So, any film that came out dealing with any element of that was going to be closely watched and in many ways probably neutered. Yet and still, there was an opportunity lost. Now, I still want to say, as a black masculinist, I consider this part of the black masculinist film genre. Not, the ending and elements of it take away from what it could have been, but I still place it in that genre, right? Where you still have black men as agents to some extent, but they're encumbered in many ways by respectability politics. They're encumbered by this idea of keeping the moral high ground and not hurting anybody. Even though at one point Omar says in the film, "Why is it that black folk are the only ones not allowed to consider violence as an option? Everybody else considers violence," and he says it as a vet. He says, I've seen. And Link says this. I think it's actually Link. But Link says, I've seen them use violence. Whites use violence. Every other group, if mistreated. But black folk are the only ones expected not to entertain it. Which is the question, or one of the questions that Spook Who Sat by the Door raises. What role can violence play when we step outside of respectability politics? And we've seen very recently what role violence can play for many whites when they're able to storm the Capitol with machine guns and live. It ends up proving Link's words true. Other people can engage violence when convenient to their narratives. But I think the missing piece for me too in this film was that I wanted to see, look, I like endings where the hero is a master strategist who outthinks everybody, plans for what people do, and survives, thrives, accomplishes his goal, and survives. That's why I tended to like movies where you kind of saw that happen, right? Films like Glass, even though the character dies in that. Other films, even like Dark Knight Rises, right? I like movies that end where, the hero, especially if he's a black male, is able to live, but able to outsmart everybody. Now, to some extent, there's an element of that where you at least find out that much of this has been strategized by Link, but not in the way I kind of hoped. I was talking about this with a friend of mine last night, and one of the things I came to was I would have liked to see a situation where they had a team of black snipers on the opposing building too. And that if Link had to die, he wasn't going to be the only one. Or see them completely escape and already have a way out of the country. See, I like films like Deacons for Defense and, films like Spook Sat by the Door, even though there's often a tragic end to our heroes. In other stories, they can survive, So for me, I would like to see more films, but films that don't necessarily have to end with tragedy, where black men can't actually make a point and live it out. There's a film I did do a review on with Anthony Mackie and Samuel Jackson, and trying to remember the name of it. It came out last year, as a matter of fact, and they played. It was based on a real life story. two black men that basically, take over the real estate industry in Los Angeles and try and bring that to, I think it's Texas. I think that's where they were. See if I can find it. But I did a review of it. And at the end of that one, they are actually able to walk away. They end up going to jail for a certain amount of time, mainly because they were black and they were, getting housing for what do you call it, for black people that black folks weren't supposed to have. They basically hired a white boy to be the face of their real estate company, and they engaged in that, buying property and then allowing black folk to purchase homes even though they weren't supposed to, right? And they end up having to go to jail for it. But at the end of that film, they moved to another country, I think South America, and they had managed to figure out how to retain some of the resources they had made from their ventures and live fairly well off, right? I think their wives met them there and so on and so forth. I like films that tend to end that way, but this was not one of them. And I felt that there was an opportunity missed because of what we could have seen, right? So let's see. Now, y'all know I tend to have problems whenever I do this, but we're going to try it, and I'm going to apologize in advance. I'm sorry. The film was called The Banker. Samuel Jackson, Anthony Mank. Thank you, Henry. I was looking it up. Didn't realize you guys had already put it in the chat. Yeah, The Banker. I enjoyed that film. But again, I like movies where, black heroes, black men in particular, kind of outsmart the situation, not even just the person, the main villain. Like, they outsmart the entire situation. I love films like that. And you don't get to see them often. You really don't. Which is why I felt like this was a bit of a missed opportunity. But I do understand that at the end of the day, the other question is, would this film have even made it to Amazon if the cops died? You guys tell me in the comment section, do you think if the cop died at the hands of Link, that this movie makes it to distribution? I'm curious, because the first film I've ever saw in my entire life on Nat Turner, right? I never thought I'd see a film on Nat Turner in all my life, ever. And then I do. And one of the things I realized after watching this, I don't think the Nat Turner film gets made if Nat didn't die at the end. Now, of course, that's a historical piece. We know Nat died. He was lynched. So there was really no getting around it. But this one, you could have told a different way. So I'm just curious. You guys tell me, do you think this film makes it? I see a few no's, number no's, mostly no's. I see one yes. Yeah. And I think Spike Lee, and I should say that because I did forget to mention that. So we know Nate Parker is the director and writer of the film. But I'm trying to see. I know Spike Lee is involved. So if I go to this screen, where is Spike in this? Okay, here we go. Produced by, it's not listed there. That's interesting. I don't know. They don't really show where he is. I thought he was involved in making this film, but I'm looking at imdb.com and they don't show Spike in here. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Spike wasn't involved. I could swear I thought he was. Interesting. I don't see it. But apparently David Oyelowo was a co-producer. But no Spike Lee. That's interesting. So anyway, yeah. So this I really thought there would be an opportunity for us to see that type of heroism. And I'm saying this, as a father too, having the man who killed your son on his knees in front of you with a gun to his head, and that gun is in your hand. It's a powerful moment. Was it? Nayusi says it was presented by Spike Lee. Is that what it was? Presented by Spike Lee? Okay, so what? He helped promote it. And that was kind of it, because it doesn't even show his name as a producer. Okay. So it's me. C says he signed on at the end as an executive producer. That's interesting because it doesn't show up on IMDb. But all right. So unless they put it down somewhere lower on the screen, no, I still don't see it. So but I'm being told that he added on as an executive producer. Okay. At the end. Yeah. So, but here's the thing: it's a film I think you need to see, but it doesn't mean I'm suggesting it because it doesn't have issues, right? I'm not suggesting that it's perfect. I'm not suggesting that it's void of problems. What I'm saying is that it's one that you at least need to have in the arsenal. Now there's a couple other films I'm going to be watching soon, and I've already heard some negative critiques from people I respect, but I'm going to see it. There's one I think it's One Night in Miami, and the other one is outside. Was it Outside the Line, Outside the Wire? There's two that I'm definitely gonna be watching very soon that I've just found out about, and I know One Night in Miami is a film that was done by what is it? Here we go. Were done by Regina King. And King is somebody that, if you're in my generation, you grew up watching her on like shows like 227. And she's one of the few people whose careers lasted since the 80s. She's constantly been working, and you can still find her working now. So she directs One Night in Miami. But again, I haven't seen that yet. So I'll be watching that soon, and I'll be posting my reviews of that to my film review Patreon group. I've heard some issues, but we got to see it ourselves to kind of make sense of some of these things. It is a question as to whether or not this I can't even say post-COVID, but this, pandemic era, what it does to Black film. There's a relevant question on the table as to whether or not the era of Black film as we have understood it has irrevocably changed. And that goes for film in general, but particularly Black film, which has always been vulnerable. And much of which the film industry at this point seems to rely a great deal on the foreign market to sustain itself. What happens to particularly Black American film? It's an interesting question, and it may be drastically diminished. What I see, the majority, a lot of the films I see coming out now, Black films, tend to be films showcased on like BET and TV One, which are primarily concerned with those who consume media to greater degrees. Yet again, Black women as their primary target audience. So often when I watch films on that channel, Black men are kind of the backdrop. We are just characters, that are just kind of thrown in with no real depth. But of course, the target audience tends to not be Black men. I did appreciate that, at least in that respect, this film was talking to Black men. Question is, what did it end up saying? The debate that takes place in the court, the quote unquote court case, is interesting. There are elements of it where, and you can see where they're trying to splice in race, class, gender, so you had suburban Black kids, suburban white kid, or youth, I should say. You had white folks as cops and as on the jury, and then you had Black prisoners who got to speak, and you got to see Black prisoners be extremely articulate, intelligent. You got to see them voice, even when they weren't extremely articulate, they still had the capacity to speak truth, which is not something you see very often, right? You don't get to see that very often. So that was interesting. You had those kind of moments. You got to see Black men in a position of authority, even if it was guerrilla authority. Xavier Brothers, appreciate that. Even if it was a position of authority on guerrilla terms, which I have no problem with whatsoever. I'm the son of a Panther. So there were elements of this that I have a nostalgia for, which is why I go to Spook Who Sat by the Door. But is respectability politics the best we can do? And I know there was no way to anticipate for filmmakers what happened at the Capitol, but I found it to be an interesting irony at the end of this film where we're concerned about not violating white sensibilities and making folks uncomfortable by showing a racist white cop who profiles two Black men and kills one of them not receive so much as a slap on the hand while the Capitol is blowing up. I found that to be a very interesting contrast. It's almost like the universe was critiquing the film in and of itself, right? Highly problematic. And the way the film, the very ending of it, right, is they have a news report on the screen where they report to you about the police department being taken over and then resecured. And then they shift to the latest basketball player, right? And they go to great lengths to describe how tall he is, his weight, 6'4" and whatever. And you can tell that it's symbolically what they're trying to say, what I think Parker is trying to say, is that the only time, an acceptable black male physicality exists in popular culture, mainstream media, is when he's bouncing a ball, right? You can be 6'4", 200 pounds as long as you're on a court. But this 14-year-old boy who may have been a threat because he picked up a phone that may have been thought to be a gun, that's a problem. So I get the point being made, right? That black male threat is only acceptable in certain contexts, and in others is justified in being erased, killed, right? Which is another level of societal disability for disposability for black men, right? So let's look at what we have in the chat. See what people are saying. Let's see. Yep, the Hispanics had issues. Let's see. Xavier says, thanks, Doc. Always good stuff. Appreciate that. A lot of debate going on in the chat about the film. Says one mogul says Netflix has some black films. The one with Jamie Foxx called Project Power was good. I think I did a review of that one. Interesting film. Okay, some talk about Regina King being the voice of the boys in the Boondocks. And that was definitely something I wouldn't expect. Of course, the latest thing we saw her in on HBO had to do with the continuation of what's the film, y'all? Y'all know what it is. I'm in one of those periods before I got to teach where my brain is not recalling anything. It is frustrating. I think I'm subconsciously protesting from having to get out of bed. But anyway, y'all know what it is. What's she in? Watchmen. Thank you, FM Gaming. VP, appreciate that. So that's the last thing we saw her in. And I think we had on the Onyx Report, we had a group of brothers come in and chime in on their thoughts on that. And one of the things we saw, right, was this idea that at the end of the film, the God power, so to speak, of Mr. Manhattan was going to women. It was just interesting because I've also just started watching American Gods season 3, and you saw the same thing with one of its God figures, Mr. World, who becomes a woman and becomes a black woman at that. So we're seeing these narratives of not only female superiority, which has been going on for a while in media, but now we're starting to see representation of black female superiority. So it's actually a bit of a different thing just to see, black men be centered and targeted in terms of who the film is talking about or to. And often we can see black men being the subject of the film, even if they're not being talked to, even though their voices are unheard, especially when we're killed. You often see works where, we are technically the starting point of the film. And this isn't new. You can go back to A Raisin in the Sun. A Raisin in the Sun starts with the death of a father who you never see. So black men, their deaths, where we are present in the film, but not, is constant, right? But what I'm going to try, just for a couple of moments, I'm going to try and bring up a couple of people. I hope this is not another mistake, because for some reason, I'm the only person on YouTube. When I bring people up in the StreamYard, there's some crazy echo. So hopefully that won't happen. And so what I will do is I will put the link in the stream, and we'll get a couple of people if you want to opine on your thoughts regarding American Skin. Yeah, I hear you, Lord. Stop watching American Gods when they fired Orlando Jones. Absolutely. I was hesitant about going back, especially, with the main character. I don't even know what he's doing with his hair. Anyway, yeah, they did a Nancy dirty in that. Absolutely. So, come on up if you have something to say about the film. If anybody has anything they want to drop on this, the link is in the comment section. But, when I think about it, like I said, I wanted to see it end a little differently. If you guys remember the film Glass with Samuel Jackson, right? And what's the name? Bruce Willis. Even though Samuel Jackson's character dies at the end of the film, all the footage is out. Now in the film, they do, kind of get the footage out. Wait, yeah, they get the footage out, but anyway. So Black to the film. Good to have you in here, man. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Okay, before you get started, are you guys hearing an echo? How's the sound? I want to hear from the comments before we dive in. You guys hear everything okay? Does it sound all right? Let me just get a response, Black, before you say anything. Okay. Okay, I'm hearing no echo. I'm being told there's no echo. All right, so your thoughts, Black to the film. What'd you think?
Oh man, I mean, I'm a big Nate Parker fan, so I might be a little bit biased because I love Birth of the Nation, and it never fails that every time in reality, because Birth of a Nation is an actual real story, right?
Mm-hmm.
Society loves to mention Harriet Tubman. They go like Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, and they say some other abolitionists. And I'm like, why did they leave out why did they leave out Nat Turner all the time? And I'm like, see, there you go, right there. That's one check for them, right?
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed the movie. I mean, myself personally, a little bit about me. I've actually seen the police. I'm from New York, so if anybody from New York know, the NYPD is the judge, jury, and executioner. So I mean, I've seen them murder a black man in front of me when I was a teenager, when I was like 14, and he was unarmed. So that really stuck with me my whole life. That really like changed my whole perspective on my place in society.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
I found the movie to be very real. I really enjoyed it. I didn't like the ending. I mean, since we're spoiling it, I don't know where he's got with this thing about. I don't even know what to call it, because it's not really heroic bloodshed. It's more like I might. Yeah, I might be incorrect in saying it. It's more like sacrificial justice. Like, I don't understand it. You control the movie, bro. Why can't you ride off in the sunset? It's just like with Queen and Slim. They was almost to Cuba, and then they had to put the snitch brother in there, and the snitch brother ratted them out for a couple of bucks that ain't even real. And it's like, but why? Why can't we just have our just like I was talking to somebody else? I think I was in another panel, and I told them, I said, the white man is our role model historically, in a sense that, not that we want to be like him, but I mean, like, we watch what he does.
Okay.
The lynchings is a form of him seeking justice for alleged crimes, not because he's afraid of the leniency in the court, but because he wants to have his own justice. And you have a mob of people out there, and they murder a man, they mutilate them, and then they go home and they ride off into the sunset. And that's the tradition we have in America for black men. I don't think nobody gets it, but we are like the ritual sacrifice. So going back to the movie, Nate Parker, he hit all of those beats. But the most important thing that I tell people, and this is why I don't want to hear no more about PhD. No offense to you, Dr. T, because you actually have a PhD. But I mean, I don't want to hear about nobody else having PhDs and education without understanding jurisprudence, right? So what I mean is that in the movie, as you know, the trial was about getting an omission from the officer of bias and profiling, which, while in and of itself is not against the law, it is a violation of their oath, which as such is against the law. Because if they swore an oath to behave a certain way, basically, I don't want to take up too much time because you got people. Basically, if they're making judgments to pull out their gun because I'm black, not because they see me with a gun, or they know that I've killed cops, or they know that I have a gun in the past dealing with me, particularly as a person, somebody in the street said, yo, Will's always, that dude over there is always armed like Rambo. And the cop knows that I'm armed like Rambo. If they're making a judgment off of anything other than, oh, he's black, pull out my gun. That right there is against the law. That is against the law, but nobody argues it that way. I mean, it's a technical thing because the way that they make their oath is against prejudice and bias in some jurisdictions. So when they size up a person and say, "Hey, man, you're gonna do what I say," and you say "fuck them," and they pull out their gun on you, they just broke the law. If they did it in their mind because they're black, and that's what the guy admits to. He admits to.
He did.
They parked driving a shit car, and that was the whole reason why he pulled them over. So it had nothing to do with speeding or insurance. You pulled them over because they're black. And that comes to my last point is that as a black man in America, either you're driving a car that's so shitty you're a suspect, or you're driving a car that's so nice you're a suspect. And you can't live in a world like that. You just can't. Whether you walk in, you're a suspect. So it's like you can't live in a world like that.
No, and I appreciate that. I'm gonna get some other people in here, but thanks, man. I appreciate that. I'm gonna hold on. I'm gonna take you down, okay? So
okay, thank you. Okay.
But I will say, as far as the whole question about him taking out the cop, they had an opportunity to use, kind of because they foregrounded a couple things. There was a point where his son was talking about by law you can defend yourself even against a cop if you're being unfairly treated. That was an opportunity where you could have connected that with the father actually doing that very thing, but they didn't. But we got Art New Style. What's up, man?
Well, what's going on, Doc, in the chat?
How you doing? Yeah.
All righty. I'm playing Chef Boyardee, but I had to chime in.
Much appreciated, man. Much appreciated.
Gotta be a dad and a hubby.
Y'all support Art New Style. Check his shows out. Brilliant brothers. So check him out. What do you think, man? Give us your thoughts.
Oh man, I had to. My son watched it too.
I watched it. Yeah.
And I told BGS that I have my son listen to your lives on Wednesdays too, because he's about to be a college student. Okay. So very important. But as far as the movie, I was looking at, because I remember I went to Cal Arts, so I got a degree in film and video and animation. So
nice.
And I had to make a film. So I kind of understood the whole format. If you remember, She's Gotta Have It, where every now and then they act, but they look in the camera and talk a few times.
Right.
They use that. So that was one. But I like how you broke down the part about the different generations. Because I didn't think about that till you brought that up. Because remember when I guess the student filmmaker had to be part of the jury, when it was his time to speak, he was conflicted, and then he had to talk his way into justice. If you notice that, he was like really thinking out loud, and later on he was like, it's not fair that we have to do this as black people, blah, blah, blah. The other part that I want to point out, a couple of things. If you notice, they were really trying to hit all the different social inequities and issues. But the part that I commend them about is they didn't throw in the alphabet stuff. That was good.
Oh, okay.
Because usually every time we have something, they got to include the alphabet, so they didn't do that. But they didn't. And then also, as far as the whole gender equality thing, they just it seemed like they just packaged that one lady with the Latina and the
Latina cop.
And then pushed her aside. Like, I'm a Latina. She wasn't even an issue anymore. It just seemed like you know what I'm saying? They just say, okay, we'll just throw her in there, and then after that, we'll get that back to the real business.
But real quick before you continue though, the problem, I think part of the issue is that it's now considered a given that you have to deal with gender in a film, and for some reason, if you deal with just black men, just heterosexual black men, that's not gendered enough. You have
not at all.
It's not gendered unless you include everybody in some particular way, which was one of the reasons I actually liked the last Shaft film, because they were unapologetic about, this story is about a black father and a black son. And they were unapologetic about it. They didn't try to include everybody else to make everybody feel good. That's what I think. So I think with this one, I think you're right. They kind of threw it in for a second just to be able to say, well, we did it. We dealt with it.
Yeah, you can't say nothing about us. And I like the part, and I'm gonna be short as possible. But I like the part about the two boys talking about the law.
Yeah.
Because one comes from an affluent school and the other one comes from a public school. The one that's from the public school is like, hey man, you got to be careful, blah blah blah. And the other one from the affluent school was like, I could do whatever I want, and you know,
Yeah.
I'm just paraphrasing.
Yes. Yes.
And Dad had to step in, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that was key, man. It was a lot of like, I mean, as you know, we're educators, so I could see a lot of splicing and just say, hey, look at this part, and just have a
Mm-hmm.
whole lecture on different parts of the film.
Okay.
And in the last part, like, because you know, people were talking about the ending. Um, I had all kinds of scenarios. I'm like, okay, it probably would have ended different if he would have shot the cop,
Mm-hmm.
executed him,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think he probably would have lived longer, but be on trial,
Mm-hmm. Right.
right? Or if he had a white dude in the group, you know, you know what I'm saying, a white savior,
Uh-huh.
he probably would have lived.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then what happens too is that I said, I put in your chat, it could be a sequel. You know, you never know. But
You
I
know,
appreciate you letting me up.
if they did that, I would love to see kind of an Assata Shakur ending where you got the Black Liberation Army breaking him out of prison, but
Yeah, the wife, you know, wife. All of a sudden, we
right,
didn't because we don't know much about the wife.
right,
You know what I'm
right.
saying? So
But
there could be all kinds of things based on the feedback on this film.
mhm. Yeah, we'll
You
see.
know,
I mean, at the end of the day, man, I told, like I said, I wanted to see, because we saw this black group of men who took over the police, station. I wanted to see them have a team B on the roof across the street. You know what I mean?
that would
And
man, I
you know,
probably
and
would have to pay more money to watch that again
hey,
if
man,
that was the case.
if Link had to go, he wouldn't be the only one. But thanks a
Yeah, I
lot, brother
was.
Art. Appreciate
Thank
that.
you, brother.
All
Thank
right,
you,
man.
brother. Take care.
You too. TD, what's up, man? What do you think?
I'm doing good, brother. How are you?
Good.
I'll say this much. I really enjoyed the movie personally, right? I thought
Okay.
it was brilliant, to be honest. All the way down to the ending.
Mm,
I know a lot of people are upset because he got killed at the end,
mm-hmm.
but I felt like it was just genuinely rooted in the reality of what is
Okay.
concerning what black men have to deal with in America, all the way down until the very end with the news reports.
Mm-hmm.
We all know what happened in the building, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if we're taking if the movie is real from the real life perspective,
Mm-hmm.
we saw that he showed mercy. He
All
still
right.
got killed. And then the news reports say he was a Muslim terrorist. He was insane. He
Right.
was crazy.
Right.
And
Right.
now here's basketball, you know?
Right. Right.
But
Right.
but
Yeah.
I'll say this in closing though. Um, I understand, I guess you could say from an emotional standpoint, why a lot of us were upset that he didn't execute the cop at the end, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But and this is kind of just an interesting thought. Maybe you can elaborate on it. I'm curious though, what it is that we're actually looking for
Yeah.
when we say we want that. And I say that because we've had real life examples of this. Christopher Dorner out here in LA,
Mm-hmm.
Mike Xavier Johnson in Dallas. I mean, we all remember these guys. We
Mm-hmm.
had real life examples of it, and it's not like the result was brothers armed up and we all just started doing the same thing. No, we sat on the sidelines and cheered them on to their deaths, and then that was it.
Mm-hmm.
So when we say we want it in movie format, why? You know
No,
what I mean? Like, what are you looking for?
no, and it's a valid question, and I thought a lot about that last night. As a matter of fact, I really did. So it's interesting you bring it up because look, the reality is for most black parents that have had to lose a child, especially to police homicide, in real life, there is a powerlessness to this shit that is incomprehensible. You know what I mean? If we just talk about media in general, most of us living through our lives every day have to grapple with powerlessness. And when we watch film or we watch media, we want to be lifted. We want to see things happen that will likely not happen in our everyday life. But, at the end of the day, you get to enjoy it in film in some kind of way. You know what I mean? Because if you look at it, man, most of the parents who've lost children, they're not taking over police stations. Even if you do have a father with military background, it's not something that generally happens. I mean, if we rarely, and maybe it's because we wouldn't even hear about it if it did. I'm not sure. But what I'm saying is, we look to media often to show us aspects of life that we often don't get to live ourselves. And so, if you've had to lose a child, or even if you just empathized with a black male, who's a boy especially, who's killed by a cop, if you're going to have a film about it, I don't want to see what we already have to live every day. Like, I don't, just a brother get killed in the end or go to jail in the end. We see that. We know people who've been to jail. You know what I mean? You want to see something that's kind of outside the realm, which is one of the reasons I think Spook, Who Sat by the Door, was so powerful to a lot of black men, especially because you got to see, the one thing in American media that we are not allowed to see, which is a revolution. Right? You don't even get to see a revolution. It doesn't happen. Like I used to show. Oh man, and I'm forgetting every movie today. But it's one with Justin Timberlake, and instead of money they use time. Now my comment section is tight with theirs, so I know it's gonna come up. It's a Justin Timberlake movie where the currency is time, and the time is how long you're able to live. You know what I mean? And in that particular film, at the end of it, is it called Out of Time, Breon? I didn't think it was called Out of In Time. Is it? I think it's In Time. Thank you, Mogul. It's called In Time. So Justin Timberlake film, and time is the currency. And really, the richest people had an unlimited amount of time. So everybody, I may get the age wrong, but I'm just going to give you the premise. So everybody lives physically to 29 years old. And if you're able to literally, have time, you can live eternally. Like, there really aren't any health issues. But if you run out of time on your clock, and they have these like digital clocks in your skin, if you and you barter it, you treat it like money. So people gamble with it, all kinds of things. If your clock goes to zero, you die on the spot, right? So in this movie, it's all white for the most part. You see a couple black characters sprinkled here and there. At the end of the film, they get to have a revolution. They get to have a revolution, right? I wanted to see that. I mean, even if you watch the Da Vinci Code, right, where they talk about, well, in that one I was disappointed because they talked about, the real history of Christ, and then there was this question: should we expose it to the world? And they don't. I'm tired of us not getting to see the revolution. I want to see it.
Well,
And I
what's
noticed that we
interesting.
can't even see it. Go ahead. What were you saying?
Well, no, I was gonna say, what's interesting, Dr. T, is what you're saying concerning wanting to see a revolution. Um, unless it's super independent, meaning like there's no way it's not going to be on all these streaming platforms.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only way we'll get it. And I saw a lot of people. I remember a lot of people making comparisons to, or not making comparisons, but just simply bringing up Django Unchained. Because that's pretty much the only movie of that nature where we won at the end. He killed the slave master and everybody else, and we won. But then when you think about that, who made the movie? The white man. They're not going to allow us to do it. You know what I mean? I think that's interesting.
It is. It's a white imagination about a black revolution, which centers around one person, right? You or even the other enslaved black men don't help him. It's not a collective gesture. It's just him, and then he disappears. But we don't get to see that with black filmmakers. And yes, King Harris. I'm talking specifically about a black revolution. I wasn't being unclear. At least I didn't think so. But thanks to Lord Hokage, I think I pronounced that. I hope I pronounced that right. And King Harris, the age was 25 in the film In Time. I said 29. But anyway, point I'm getting at is, I notice even when you go to Spook Who Sat by the Door, I notice who's not allowed to revolt and have that shown, because the film itself, even though it shows it unapologetically, is removed from theaters, right? If you talk about films where you get to see elements of it, it only goes so far, and then they kind of pull it back, so it doesn't go to the full extent. A Time to Kill, excellent film, Nayusi, where you do get to see a black father. And I love Samuel Jackson's portrayal in that, right? Because he's actually able to strategize a lot of things. People underestimate his intelligence. He not only, kills the men that violate his daughter, he gets off. And between kind of, jousting with Matthew McConaughey's the white lawyer, and even the NAACP. He's able to secure money for his family while he's in prison. So he's much smarter than people think, and he strategizes what he's doing. By the end of the film, he's sitting there eating barbecue at home with his family. I love to see endings like that, and there are so few. So I appreciate you bringing that up, man. But TD, I appreciate you coming up, man. Thank you.
Thank you for letting me speak with you, brother. I appreciate that. You have a great day.
No, you too, man. Thank you. So yeah. So that said, I'm gonna let me see here. Still trying to get used to some of this stuff. Learning a lot of new stuff in a very short period of time. So I appreciate y'all's patience. But we are going to have office hours tonight. I haven't posted them. I'm about to. So give me a couple of minutes when we do. And office hours is basically an after show discussion with my members. So if you're interested, you can join, become a member, and you can go from there. Let's see. Maybe okay. I'm gonna get. Let me do this. I'm gonna get one more in while we can. Just give him a quick second. All right, Charlie. Charlie,
Hey,
you there?
what's going on? Yeah, I am here. Can you hear me?
Yeah. I got. Let me. Okay. Are you
I
coming
am.
into the frame, or you just showing us your
Yeah,
book?
I can. So
There
let
we
me
go.
turn my background off. Yeah.
All right. I just want to just real quick give us your thoughts because we're about to close out.
My thoughts real quick are that a lot of these movies that have to do with these kinds of things has to do with us always having to orchestrate our own sense of justice, which is the thing that I think is important to point out in these power dynamics because white people don't have to collect themselves together and create a whole circumstance of justice for themselves, whether you're talking about Samuel L. Jackson in The Negotiator or Time to Kill or all these movies that we're talking about. And
Mm,
so I think that's an important thing to highlight when we're looking at these movies in which we're trying to find a kind of self esteem in these mediums. Um, I would really like it if we had something akin to an asymmetry that we only know about, in which we're able to maneuver to use things for our benefit and our benefit only.
what do you mean by an asymmetry?
Um, so when I say asymmetry, maybe of information, how we deal with ourselves culturally when it comes to these things,
Mm,
some kind of pre-planned response to these things in which we can I don't know, kind of begin to kind of play chess. I've heard some brothers talk about doing things such as making sure we all have life insurance so that when these things go down, there's a way to kind of like bankrupt certain kinds of systems. I don't know how reasonable that is, but at least it's kind of the brainstorming of realizing that there's going to have to be a certain dynamic of power that we're actually going to actually have to take for ourselves, even
okay.
though it may not be taking over the entire system.
Okay. Well, look, man, I'm gonna have to close out, but I just wanted you to get your last word in. So, last 10 seconds. Is there anything else you want to add?
Now, that's it. I appreciate you, brother.
All right. Thanks a lot, man. All right. Stylist, what's up? Good to see you in there. All right. So let's get back to it. So, okay. All right. So, as you guys know, how we do, we're gonna close out here, and like I said, give me about 5 minutes to start up the link and post it in the community tab on YouTube and in Patreon for my Patreon supporters, so we can continue the discussion there. But in closing, I'm here to tell you, brothers, we are not criminals by birth, perennial rapists, incapable intellects, man children, sperm donors, child support wellsprings, success objects, walking phalluses, ATM machines, lottery tickets, brainless henchmen, valueless assassins, pro bono mercenaries, unpaid bodyguards, interchangeable stepfathers, child discipline proxies, unpaid repairmen, workhorses, emotional tampons, or any other socially accepted dehumanizing stereotype. We are thinkers, inventors, innovators, leaders, fathers, warriors, and men. Embrace your humanity, know your worth, and extend your time, attention, and resources only to those who genuinely respect you. And remember, your worth is not defined by meeting other people's narcissistic, selfish, and unrealistic needs. You define your worth. Peace.